What if everything you thought you understood about Ghostface was wrong? And what if Scream 7 isn't just another sequel, but a carefully constructed psychological war designed to dismantle the very foundation of fear that began with Scream? This time the rules aren't just broken, they're rewritten in blood, and the biggest twist isn't simply who is behind the mask of Ghostface, but how three different minds operate like a single organism across one relentless, chaotic night. Unlike Scream 6, where tension stretched across multiple days and locations, Scream 7 compresses nearly every murder, betrayal, and revelation into a suffocating timeline that unfolds before sunrise, turning the entire film into a ticking clock of paranoia. The story begins at the most symbolic place imaginable, Stu Macher's house, now transformed into a grotesque Airbnb-style museum celebrating the Woodsboro murders and the Stab franchise, a location that already feels cursed before a single drop of new blood is spilled. Scott and Madison arrive expecting thrills and nostalgia, laughing as they live-stream their stay, unaware that they're stepping into a ritualistic opening sacrifice. Scott mistakes a silent figure in the corner for a decorative mannequin dressed as Ghostface, mocking it for views, until the blade enters his stomach and he realizes too late that this is no prop. The killer stabs him repeatedly, methodically, almost clinically, sending a message that this film will not waste time with hesitation. Madison's escape attempt is even more theatrical. She scrambles up the staircase beneath a glittering chandelier, screaming for help that will never come, only for the fixture to shatter and send her plunging downward onto a knife waiting precisely where her body will land, a kill so staged it feels rehearsed. And then comes the fire, the house set ablaze in a roaring inferno that consumes one of horror cinema's most iconic locations, an act that is less about hiding evidence and more about symbolic annihilation. Someone wants to erase the shrine of trauma connected to Sidney Prescott, and that level of psychological calculation immediately suggests a mastermind who understands history as much as violence. As the night spreads outward from the burning house, suspicion fractures into three names: Jessica, Marco, and Carl, and what makes Scream 7 so gripping is that the film quietly plants alibis and spatial logic that allow the audience to track each killer's possible movements like detectives assembling a crime board. The next attack shatters any illusion of safety when Hannah is murdered during rehearsal for the school's stage production. Dressed as a fairy and suspended midair by wire rigging, she becomes a grotesque spectacle as Ghostface disembowels her under blazing stage lights, transforming theatrical innocence into public execution. The staging is elaborate, requiring access to backstage controls and timing, which raises immediate questions about who among the suspects could move freely without drawing attention. Jessica, at this exact moment, is firmly accounted for with her son Lucas, a detail she volunteers almost too eagerly when questioned, while Carl has already positioned himself elsewhere with a patience that suggests long-term infiltration rather than spontaneous attack. That leaves Marco as the only unaccounted-for presence during Hannah's death, and when Aaron, the backstage technician responsible for operating the rigging, is later found murdered earlier in the timeline but discovered after Hannah's body falls, the pattern becomes disturbingly clear. Marco eliminates obstacles first, then executes the showpiece kill. Yet the film refuses to confirm this outright, forcing viewers to constantly reevaluate assumptions as new information surfaces. The most terrifying shift in tone occurs when the violence invades Sidney's home, because this time there is no dramatic break-in, no shattered glass or forced locks. The killer is already inside, hiding in the attic crawl space above the hallway, listening to conversations, studying routines, waiting for the perfect ambush. When Sidney, Mark, and their teenage daughter Tatum are attacked, the brutality feels personal rather than performative, and the choreography of the fight suggests someone intimately familiar with the layout of the house. The struggle spills into the street, where the attacker is struck by a car driven by gale weathers in a moment that feels both shocking and darkly ironic, and when the mask is removed, Carl's face is revealed, obsessed with the stab mythology, delusional enough to believe he belongs inside it. His unmasking, however, happens shockingly early in the narrative, flipping audience expectations on their head. Instead of serving as the climactic reveal, Carl's death confirms that the nightmare is only halfway complete. With one Ghostface eliminated, The focus narrows to Jessica and Marco, and the film cleverly crosscuts their locations to create overlapping timelines that force viewers to mentally map who could realistically commit each subsequent murder. Mark becomes the next target in the family garage, ambushed and kidnapped in a calculated strike that occurs while Marco is visibly working hours away at a psychiatric center, a distance that logically eliminates him from the scene. The implication is chilling. Jessica, outwardly grieving and cooperative, is capable of calculated savagery behind the mask. Meanwhile, the Tavern massacre explodes into chaos as Chad and Mindy are attacked in the kitchen during peak hours, slashed and left bleeding among shattered glass and overturned tables. Lucas, Jessica's own son, is chased and brutally killed when his head is slammed onto a pointed beer tap in one of the film's most gruesome moments, and the camera lingers just long enough on Ghostface's stillness after the act to imply something deeper than rage, something almost resentful. Later, Jessica makes a cold, offhand comment that Lucas had to go because he reminded her too much of his abusive father, a line that reframes the entire sequence and strongly suggests that she murdered her own child as part of a twisted emotional purge. Chloe's death follows within the same tavern spree, cornered and killed in the kitchen within a narrow time window that logically allows for only one killer to be present, reinforcing the conclusion that Jessica orchestrated and executed that massacre alone while Marco operated elsewhere. Ben's sudden throat stabbing occurs at a moment when Carl is already dead and Jessica is still accounted for at the tavern scene, leaving Marco as the only feasible assailant, solidifying his role as the roaming executioner who strikes isolated targets between larger set pieces. The coffee shop sequence amplifies the sense of coordinated terror when Tatum is stalked through narrow aisles and cornered behind the counter. The first attacker's build and timing align with Marco's earlier movements, yet the arrival of a second Ghostface midway through the struggle confirms synchronized teamwork, proving that Jessica and Marco are communicating, adapting, and converging as the night accelerates toward its finale. What makes Scream 7 uniquely disturbing is that it treats murder like choreography, each kill strategically placed to dismantle Sidney's emotional stability piece by piece, burn her past, invade her home, destroy her chosen family, and eliminate the next generation. By the final act, when Jessica's true motivations surface, the film reframes itself not as a slasher about fame or revenge,